Well, good morning, Joseph. Did you actually say you're on the West Coast? It really is early for you then.
Yeah. Today, I happen to be in Seattle,
Uh,
right in Bellevue, Washington. So a little bit early in the morning, but that's okay. And it's good to get going with you. Let's get
Perfect. All
rocking.
right. Yeah, so let's just do some quick intro. So I know you're the CRO of Nerdio. Nerdio is a big Gotham partner, and we're going to
Yep.
talk about that today. But maybe just give a quick background, like how long have you been at Nerdio, or how did you land in this position?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks for having me, Ken. Good to be here. And I'm Joseph Landes. I worked at Microsoft for 23 years. And in 2018, I was introduced at Microsoft's partner conference, Microsoft Inspire, to Vadim Vladimirsky, who became my co-founder. And we started Nerdio together. I actually came over to partner with Vadim. We started November 2018, and we actually incorporated Nerdio right at the beginning of 2020. Vadim was actually running a managed service provider in Chicago called Adar,
Mhm.
and Nerdio was incubated. The software that became Nerdio was incubated out of that MSP. So that's how we met each other. And in the beginning of 2020, we ended up selling the MSP, and a few of us went off and started the software company that became Nerdio.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think look, I'm a VDI guy. Like I always tell people, like I basically sent all my four kids to college on Citrix licensing. I've been doing even Gotham is a big VDI proponent. Roots back to the I still people modem racks before there's internet. That's how much VDI I sold.
Wow.
So so this whole topic is very sort of close to my heart into Gotham's center. I think it's there's just a lot going on right now in it. And I guess from your perspective, you know the numbers kind of show BDI still growing, but of course there's still a ton of PCs out there. Whatever. Like what do you think the state of the market is? Do you think some people are predicting massive growth, some people are predicting lesser growth. Like the state of VDI as a whole. Let's look at the whole story of virtual desktops. Do you think is that still a function? Do you think that's still a need, and why do you think that is?
Yeah. So, well, I sent my three kids to college, thanks to Microsoft, right?
Hey
So,
there.
so I'm a big Microsoft fan, and of course, Vadim and I built our whole company on top of, native Microsoft technology.
Right.
VDI, of course, is something that there was a real need for it when Microsoft launched Windows Server 2000, right? And companies like
Right.
Citrix and VMware really took things like RDS and made them a lot better.
Right.
And if you look at sort of the business that we've built, and you look at where we stand today, we really saw that Microsoft was going to be investing in a tremendous way in this space. That, of
Right.
course, I think the first major investment was, what was called Windows Virtual Desktop when they launched it in October 2019. And in fact, we were one of the launch partners for Windows Virtual Desktop. We had it built into our Nerdio Manager product at the time. We weren't working with Gotham, but we had this product that we still have, Nerdio Manager for MSP, that was all about empowering managed service providers whose customers were primarily SMB customers to build a cloud practice. And most of those customers who were doing desktop virtualization were doing it on the back of RDS. So those MSPs were incredibly excited because now Microsoft has this great new product, Windows Virtual Desktop, where you could stream your desktop from the Azure cloud. MSPs were thinking of moving to Azure anyways, and the licensing was a lot easier. The product was a lot better. So that was, I would say, Microsoft's big first move, or big first recent move, to help popularize the technology. And I think we all know that once Microsoft gets behind something, they can really lead a shift in the market. And then that kind of led down the road in towards the end of 2021 with the launch of Windows 365, which was certainly another big step forward in terms of popularizing Microsoft Desktop as a service. And even with recent launches of things like the little Link device that they have, improving products like Microsoft Intune. Microsoft is all in on desktop as a service. All you have to do is look at any of the most popular analyst reports, the Gartner Magic Quadrant, the Forrester Wave, the IDC, whatever they call their thing, I can't remember. But Microsoft is all the way up and to the right in terms of the leader quadrant, and everybody else is sort of much further down to the left and kind of, I don't want to say fading away, but certainly not leaders like Microsoft is. So I think we made a bet on Microsoft continuing to popularize this technology and continuing to invest in this technology, and we think that was the right bet. Everyone else who's sort of in this space, we sort of see as people who, especially people who are running their own DaaS service, are more marginal players, and we think that Microsoft is going to continue to take share. In fact, we were speaking with Gartner and their analysts who cover this space some time ago, and they said, I think something like more than 90% of the inquiries that customers call in for Gartner advice are on the
Mhm.
Microsoft platform.
Right.
So, we think that that's not just the present, but the future as Microsoft continues to invest, and we're super happy to be partnered with Microsoft on that journey.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And one of the things you said, which this is definitely true. So, but Microsoft makes a decision to do something, they pretty much always, come out on top of it. And I think the numbers, the reports I'm reading too, kind of, say that too. But I also feel like, although sort of anecdotally, when we talking about the customers, they all want to be on Azure, but they're not moving off and they all want to get off the VMware, the Citrix technology. On some, not many of them want to get off those technologies for commercial reasons that are pretty valid. But they're not going to Azure with sort of the speed I expected them to. I would have to say I thought people would be further along that journey than they are. Do you think there's some truth to that? I mean, I think if you say what's your plan? Yeah, my plan's to be Azure. Like, okay, how much are you? How's that happening? Do you feel it's not happening at the rate that I think a lot of customers, or I'm sure that you would like?
Right. So I'll answer that question, but just to also maybe comments on something you said, Ken.
Uh-huh.
I think you're right that Microsoft, when they take a decision to sort of go in a particular direction, they're typically successful. But I think it's because of partners like Gotham and Nerdio that they're able to be successful. Microsoft has really built their businesses on the back of partners for many, many, many years. And I think it's because of the investment that our partnership that we have with Gotham, which we really treasure, that customers are able to really see the value of what Microsoft is developing and investing in. And I think that's an important point. You ask about Azure. I mean, I guess there's always going to be customers that are in different points in their journey, for sure.
Right.
But Microsoft released their earnings last night. I guess if you're watching this podcast, last night, today is July 31st, 2025, depending on when you're watching this. So last night, Microsoft released their earnings, and they're growing Azure. They grew Azure 39% year on year on a $75 billion business. So
Right.
that's pretty good. That's
Yeah.
pretty tremendous. That's like adding a Monday.com, and they just sort of found it in the change in their couch or something like that,
Right.
right? So that's
Yeah.
a huge amount of growth. So are there customers that are sort of debating whether they should go full on? I think yes. I think one of the interesting things that Vadim and I see all the time in the workload that you and I are discussing, and sort of desktop as a service, the older VDI on-prem move to desktop as a service in the cloud, is that we typically don't see customers going multi-cloud when it comes to DaaS, right? There's always
Right.
this kind of talk about, oh, do you need to support multiple clouds? Is the customer multi-cloud? I think customers are multi-cloud, but not in this workload. We don't typically sort of encounter a customer who says, well, I've got 5,000 users that need a virtual desktop. We're going to put like half of them on AVD, and we're going to put some of them on AWS Workspace, and we're going to keep some of them on prem, doing something else. I think typically they're eventually centered on one platform, and I think because of the investments that Microsoft has made in AVD, in Windows 365, and the whole ecosystem around that of partners and other ISVs, we see that as sort of the ultimate destination for this workload. and where things are definitely going. Will it take time? Does it take time for customers, particularly with, I don't know, we met with a large enterprise customer who has 1,000 applications that they need to migrate over. So yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time to test them and prep them and do all those things. But eventually, we think the ultimate destination is Microsoft desktop as a service, Windows in the cloud.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and again, I think people are heading that way. I mean, is there, and you're making the point, like the desktops have always been more complicated than people want them to be. Like in doing that, all the application integration, all the publishing, all stuff. But I think Intune's helping with that, some of those things too. I mean, do you feel like what's your role in sort of easing that transition at Nerdio?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? If you look at the investments that Microsoft has made in desktop as a service. By the way, Microsoft doesn't call it desktop as a service. I think that's kind of like a funny thing. If you talk to Scott Manchester, who runs
Yeah,
the engineering team, we're very close with Scott. You will never hear him say desktop as a service. They use the term Windows in the cloud, which is
you
fine. The rest of the world, I think, sort of refers to it as desktop as a service. But nevertheless, it's interesting because if you look at Microsoft's offerings, AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, is managed through the Azure portal, while Windows 365 is managed through the Intune portal.
right,
So when you talk about companies using different technologies, what we do see companies who would like a mix of AVD and Windows 365, depending on the user, let's say, right? They may
hmm
have a group of users, maybe a group of developers, a group of occasional frontline workers that just need a desktop for a certain period of time, or they might need a shared desktop, let's say task workers. So they might be using Windows 365 while others might be using AVD. It's a little bit challenging for that company to have their IT professionals managing, sort of desktop as a service in multiple Microsoft portals. Where we've addressed that at Nerdio is you use Nerdio Manager, and we really abstract the different Microsoft portals from the work, let's say, that the IT professional has to do. So they just use Nerdio Manager. They're able to deploy their desktops in either AVD or Windows 365. They're able to use Intune. We make Intune a lot easier to
hmm
use. They're able to create one desktop image, for example, that allows them to share that image between AVD and Windows 365. So I think that most enterprise companies, to answer your original question, they own Intune by virtue of the fact that they've bought Microsoft 365 Business Premium. And
Yep,
then we see sort of varying degrees of usage of Intune in the enterprise space that I think we're working on addressing, certainly making Intune and all the surrounding, I'd say, desktop as a service technologies easier to use.
yeah. I think that's important for the people to get over there. I think a lot of people are just scared of the cost, to be honest with you. I mean, the people are moving to Azure, to your point, all the Office 365 stuff, the email, the stuff, whatever. But they're starting to see some Azure bills, and I think how do you talk to clients, kind of prepare them for the economics around
Yeah.
moving their desktop workloads to the cloud?
I think there's sort of two areas of efficiency that we address at Nerdio. When we speak with customers, you sort of have to talk, I think, about overall efficiency. We have a feature, if you will, or I guess you'd call a product within a product called Nerdio Advisor that helps customers understand what is the cost they're going to incur by moving, let's say, from an on-prem Citrix environment over into the cloud with AVD. So there's different costs, right? There's the hard cost of
hmm
purchasing Azure Compute and storage and all the bits and bobs of networking and log analytics and all the things that sort of comprise your Azure bill, as you say. Uh, and then there's sort of the how much time is it going to take me as an IT professional to do all these things? So on the hard costs, we have quite powerful auto scaling built into our product. I know all of you at Gotham make use of that and
Yep.
certainly advocate it to your customers that help customers save a tremendous amount of money on their Azure bill. We're very motivated at Nerdio to help customers save as much money as they can, just like Gotham is, right? I mean,
Right, right.
every penny is something that we would love to help them save. And I think we're able to really show them in our Nerdio Advisor, what the cost will be what is their cost today, and what would their costs be if they did not use Nerdio on their move over to AVD, or if they did use Nerdio. And then I think there has been the more, I'd say, elusive cost savings, excuse me, which is really the soft cost savings, right? How long does it take me to do something? So if I'm an IT professional, Microsoft comes out with their Patch Tuesday. I need to take that. I need to create a new desktop image. I need to test it. I need to propagate it to, tens of thousands of users. How much time is that? When we speak to customers, they find that it's many hours of work, many, many hours. We have a phrase that we used when Vadim and I started Nerdio. We call it three-click management. We have this idea that we want every task that a user does, that an IT professional does in Nerdio Manager, to be 3 clicks or less. Why? Because we want to simplify an IT professional's life. We don't want them to have to do it the most complicated way. We want them to be able to do it, as easily as they possibly can. So we've actually now within Nerdio Advisor started to create technology to show the hours of savings that an IT professional can have using our technology. We even have technology in Nerdio Advisor that shows carbon emission savings for folks that are excited about that as well. So I think, you're right that if a customer just sort of moves over from an on-prem environment over into Azure and doesn't use any of these technologies that are available, like auto scaling, to save money, they're going to get a pretty surprising Azure bill. But if they leverage that, if they use the guidance that partners like Gotham, like Nerdio are giving them, actually they're going to find that they're going to save a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous amount of time relative to their on-prem VDI solution.
Yeah, it's a transition I think for a lot of customers that and first of all, so we are a managed service provider, and we do use Nerdy, and it's that part of the business is growing rapidly. But when I'm talking which thank you for that, by the way, thank you.
Yeah.
But I think that when I'm talking to customers, a lot of time it's there's a mind shift about becoming a service provider to your ITP, instead of the old budget of sort of capital, like, and the budget is for the computer and the budget's for the licenses, the budget of this, like moving to a model where you're charging on a per user basis, and becoming an internal MSP, or using an MSP is a change in sort of business model, but it's a very powerful and good one, because once you're doing that, now the economic gains are going to be chased a lot harder than they might have been traditionally with when you're just sort of budgeting machines and all that stuff. So
I think that's right. It's almost like most people can understand that from their day-to-day
right.
personal technology use, right? They have a Netflix subscription.
Hmm.
It costs them, I don't know what it, $15, $20 a month, a user a month,
Right, right.
right? Or a family a month now, or whatever it is they charge. So when you start adding other streaming services as a consumer, you start asking yourself, am I using it? How many movies am I watching a month?
Hmm.
Am I using it? Is my partner using it? Are my kids using it?
Yep.
It's a little bit the same way, the sort of SaaS economics, right? The per user per month model. You do become more aware, more cognizant of what things cost. I would agree with that, Ken. And that's why I think we at Nerdio, and I know you at Gotham running managed services, do think about helping customers be as efficient as they possibly can be, because, across many, many users, even a few pennies add up to a tremendous amount each month.
Yeah, but it's a journey, because you're teaching the customers who are technical people to
Right.
become product people, like you're take a product manager mindset to this desktop service you're going to offer to your instead of letting people just sort of go out and capitalize and just buy laptops, right? That's
Right.
just a capex spends.
Yeah. Funny enough, one of the most asked for features over the years when we sort of launched Nerdio Manager for Enterprise was the ability to do, chargebacks, if you will, to each user, to each department, right?
Right,
Because you're right, it's sort of maybe the IT professional who runs the desktops wasn't as excited about it, but the person who's paying the bills wanted to know sort of who's using what. They didn't want sort of just one big bill, one big Azure bill. They want to know exactly which department is consuming the most. And I think that's a
right.
very important, set of functionality that we have as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a good culture shift, and I think
I
hopefully
agree.
people are getting towards that space.
I agree.
Um, yeah, I mean, you mentioned before about like different sort of use cases, people needing one type of desktop versus another, and what kind of things. I mean, how do you see? Are there places that you think companies should just be no brainer? If you've got these kind of use cases, you should be running, not walking up to Azure Desktop.
Of course, the whole move to desktop as a service was incredibly popularized and needed at the beginning of the pandemic, right?
Right.
Sort of customer after customer that both you and I'm sure we could speak about a long
Yeah.
list of customers who called into us saying,
Yeah.
we need to go. For example, I remember one of our original customers was actually a tollway service in Denver, Colorado, right? So
Yeah.
imagine you're driving on this road and you have to pay a toll, but maybe you dispute the toll. You call into a call center, someone answers the phone for you to discuss your bill, right?
Right.
Well, early in the pandemic, they had this sort of call center of, I think, 400 people. Someone got sick. Everyone had to go home because if you remember in the early days, we
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
really know what was going on. Everyone had to go home, but they couldn't pick up their desktop, computers and sort of take them on the bus home. They had to sort of still be productive. So they all went home. They basically sat on their couch. They all took out whatever device they had. The toll road company sent them a link. They click on this link, and now you're going to have access through Azure to all your applications, to everything you need to keep running this tolling business, right? So I definitely think call center is such a big one. I think
Yep.
schools is another great one. We've seen a tremendous amount of uptake from universities, right? Who have students, who have staff that need access to devices at certain times, that have labs maybe where usage spikes at certain times and then it doesn't need to be used. Government workers is another one. But honestly, what I would say, Ken, is that certainly because of the way Microsoft designed Azure Virtual Desktop, now Windows 365, it's such a platform product. It's such a need for almost anyone. And I think when you ask someone, I think in the old days, I say old days, like 5 years ago, right?
Mhm.
We would talk about working in the office or working from home, right? Like remember, it was
Right.
like an odd thing to work from
Right.
home, right? You had to sort of
Right.
ask your manager, like, can I work from home today? I have a delivery coming, right?
Yeah.
Now, like who would ever think twice? Because most people are doing that. So what we call
Right.
it is work from anywhere, right?
Right.
It's not really about working in the office or working at home on your desk in your office at home. It's about working from anywhere. And I think everyone wants the flexibility to be able to work from anywhere on any device at any time. So,
Right.
so as a result, I think DAS, desktop as a service, is a great use case for anyone who wants to do it. My father's a lawyer for many, many, many years
Mhm.
at his law firm. That's how they worked. Yes, he went to the office, but when he was traveling, he was using VDI. He didn't know much about what VDI was, but I would look over his shoulder and see, well, he had the little icon he had to click on, right? It was a Citrix icon of some sort, and he'd launch his desktop, right? I mean, so I think almost any segment of the population, any vertical, is quite good. I think the one now that is ready to make the big move to Azure and to AVD specifically is healthcare. I think
Yeah.
healthcare has sort of been the domain of Citrix for many years, and I think it had a lot to do. It has a lot to do with the surrounding applications that need to be run, things like Epic,
Mhm. Yeah.
Cerner, right? As those applications are certified for AVD, you're going to see a lot more hospitals and healthcare institutions moving as well, so that doctors can just go in, they can sort of badge in with Imprivata. They're using, Epic on their desktop. They're moving from examining room to examining room. A tremendous use case for DAS as well.
Yeah. We're Gotham is a New York company, as you can
Yep.
imagine, and we've just a lot of finance people here, and I always, you know, experiences essentially highly regulated. Security still tops the list for in my experience, for the reason people don't want to be on distributed compute devices, and they want that centralization. I mean, so and that situation just continues to escalate, right? That cyber situation just continues to escalate. Are you seeing that, as a driver in your world?
Yeah, I mean, financial services is a huge vertical, I think, in the space. You're right. So I think that anyone that's highly regulated, anyone where the organization wants to really have a lot more control over what users are able to do on their desktop is another tremendous use case. And you're right. I mean, you all at Gotham are perfectly positioned to take advantage of that, being in the heart of financial services.
Yeah, it's such a great resiliency solution. Like you have these conversations with, I've got some of these big financials, they have all these laptops. If they wake up one day and, 10,000 laptops are bricked, like
Yeah.
there's no easy way to fix that problem. I don't, but the kind of resiliency you can get with a desktop as a service function is just can't be beat.
Right. What was that big cybersecurity challenge we had? What was it, 2 years ago or something like that? What was
Oh, the CrowdStrike
the
issue and
CrowdStrike incident, right? The
yeah,
CrowdStrike incident, right? You'd walk through, Newark Airport, and you'd see all these electronic signs that were totally bricked, and you'd see these
yeah,
people
yeah,
crawling underneath the sign because they had to stick a USB device, into the thing. How many of our customers had challenges because of that? Like zero. Like I think
yeah,
one person called in and said, did we do this right? Did we roll back, to the right way? But
yeah,
anyone who was using AVD at that time, anyone who was
yeah.
using Windows in the cloud had no challenge at all.
Yeah, and again, it's not just that we solve for that one problem. The truth is that this whole thing's just naturally resilient, and I think that's part of what like that was just the CrowdStrike day was a surprise, just like many surprises we've gotten.
Right.
But this is a foundationally resilient architecture, and so we don't have to guess like, well, is it going to be ransomware? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be a bad patch? It's
That's right.
all of those things are covered.
Totally
I think
agree.
I think that's a massive motion. Um, well, I guess I'd like to kind of just shift a little bit into like what what do you think? You talked about the advisor, you talked about some things, but customers who are planning, thinking about Azure, planning Azure, like let's get that like a to do list. Like what should they be doing? How should they be looking at it? What are the things they can be doing now to kind of get that going? So when you're talking to somebody who's on the cusp of this, like what does the action list look like?
Yeah, I guess we sort of think of it when we talk about how Nerdio can help organizations of all sizes make that move. We sort of think of it in sort of the day zero, the day one, the day two, we call it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the day zero is sort of what you referred to. I'm thinking about moving from the on-prem Citrix world into AVD.
Mhm.
Okay, usually the first question that we're asked is like, what's that going to cost me? So you have the Nerdio advisor, you have other tools that are out there that can kind of help you scope out a cost. But then
Mhm.
there's other things that we talked about, like sort of what line of business applications do I have, and are they going to work, and how do I test them, and how do I make use of, lots of the surrounding sort of DAS ISV ecosystem technologies that can help you get ready for that. So there is, I would say, a planning component to that. Sometimes a company's planning is accelerated because maybe they have a renewal of their existing on-prem infrastructure that
Mhm.
they're being presented with, and as you say, sort of what's happening in the ecosystem now, they don't necessarily want to pay 100% more for their you
Yeah.
know legacy on-prem software. So there's the whole kind of thinking about it, and also I think even within that we talk probably not enough about it. There's just a training aspect, right? Imagine you're an IT professional that's kind of done things a certain way for 20 years, and now you need to operate in the cloud. It's why we at Nerdio, we spend a lot of time and a lot of money investing in training camps and online courses and certifications
Mhm.
for IT pros to get smarter about the technologies that they're going to be moving to. So that to me is sort of the day zero. Then the day one to us is the actual deployment, is being able to use Nerdio Manager to deploy users and get them up and running, in an hour or so, right? So just making it as simple as possible for an IT professional to sort of migrate their existing technology over into the cloud. But probably what we find the IT professionals care most about is the day two. It's the ongoing work that they need to
Yeah.
do in order to support their users, right? The monitoring, the application management, the day-to-day running of the desktops, which is where we put a tremendous amount of effort behind it at Nerdio as well. So there is a certain amount of work that has to happen. There's
Mhm.
something to it, and I think it's why we've seen over 10,000 deployments of Nerdio manager. And so I'd like to say we've sort of seen everything, but it's why we invest and why we really think about this kind of how can we be useful to the customer and to partners like Gotham at the day zero, the day one, and the day two.
Yeah. I think that is the ongoing concern, and like the old, my desktop is slow, right? Like that, and balancing that in a cloud sort of allocation kind of way. I
Mhm.
mean, I know that's something you guys do, but how do you? I mean, I don't know. I guess how do you talk to people about that concern? Like, I don't want to. I'm afraid they're going to be slow.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe in the early days of Nerdio, I
Yeah.
go back 7 years or so, we would hear that a little bit more.
Yeah.
It honestly doesn't come up as much as one would think. As Microsoft has made incredible investments in, device redirection and Teams and things like that, you could sort of go in and show someone a demo of Teams running on a virtual desktop, and they really have no idea that it is a virtual desktop rather, right? So it doesn't come up quite as much. It comes up, but not quite as much, and you could just sort of show them with the sort of commonly available tools what their desktop is going to look like. And of course, they have to plan things, bandwidth and allocation, and all,
Mhm.
all kinds of things like that. But it doesn't quite come up as much as one would think for us.
Yeah. I think the physics has just gotten naturally better as Azure's picked up more and more of the workload to begin with. It's not like you're reaching out just for desktops. Like that's where your team's server is already in Azure. So is your email.
Right.
So is your obviously. So like all as this critical mass of services in Azure grows, and it obviously just creates a better physics. Better
In the early days of Nerdio, I would remember, running into a small managed service provider serving a very small community, let's say somewhere
Mhm.
in the US, and they're like, we are deep in the woods in Montana, and we're concerned that by moving to Azure, because we don't really have great internet. Okay, yeah, you may have a problem, right? You
Yeah.
may have a
Right. Right.
problem, right?
Right.
But
Right.
as the technology has gotten better, as Microsoft has continued to build out more data centers, as the availability of these data centers has increased, it comes up less and less, I would say.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other truth, which you're kind of saying, which is everybody's internet connection in their homes has just gotten better and better because
Right.
otherwise your kids would kill you because they couldn't
Right,
stream.
right,
Like you're
right,
everybody has pumped up. There's nobody living on a DSL line.
right.
Um,
That was the initial worry, right? In the early days of, I mean, I remember in the early days of the pandemic, right? And
right,
everyone's kids had to go to school at home. We had to
yeah,
work at home. Everyone was kind of worried about bandwidth and what were their calls going to be like and things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. And the technology, what was it that Satya said? We moved forward 2 years and 2 months or something, right? So
Right, right, yeah. It's crazy. All
yeah.
right. Well, this has been very useful for me. I guess maybe in closing, is there something you that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about, or something that you think you'd want to like just make sure that people like leave at top of mind with?
Well, we covered a lot, Ken, for sure, and it was super fun being part of this podcast with you and to see other Gotham employees who we work with. I see at
Yeah,
the top of the screen there, so
yeah,
very exciting. Hello, everyone. I think we're living in a tremendous time for desktop as a service. We haven't lived through this kind of experience for a while. Everyone always talks, is that, right? What's the
yeah,
famous phrase everyone uses? Is this the year of VDI? Is it not?
yeah,
But I sort of feel like we've been living through, at least since we started Nerdio, it's been like 7 years of the year of VDI for us. The technology
yeah,
continues to get better every year. At Nerdio, we're coming out with new version of our product every 6 weeks with 10, 15, 20 new features that partners like Gotham customers have suggested to us. There's just a tremendous amount of amazing things going on in the ecosystem right now. And you wake up every day just sort of, being wowed almost every day by what you see. So it couldn't be a more exciting time for what we're all talking about today. And I think as we, mutually serve our customers, I think they're the ones who are really going to benefit from this. So, we're incredibly excited about the partnership we have with Gotham. So really a big thanks to you and the entire company standing behind you. And we look forward to many, many more years ahead together serving and delighting our customers.
it's been good. It's been great to have you on. And yes, I want to thank you for your partnership too. And you guys are a great partner. Yeah, just it's great tech. But Great Tech does always make a great partner. You guys really do have a great respect, I know, for your customers and for your partners. So thank you for that.
Thank you so
Terrific.
much. Great to be here.
All right. Well, thanks for joining, Joseph. Thanks for everybody for listening. And if you have any questions, problems, please reach out to your Gotham reps, and we're happy to help you and get you some more information about Nerdio. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.